Hello and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true and open debate you've been looking for. A new post office location in question. A cabinet minister resigns. Power outages leave customers fuming. The opposition gets prepared for another internal vote for leadership. And the head of BTC's parent company in hot water over comments about the Prime Minister. There is no shortage of issues to keep the news cycles going. The governing Free National Movement is putting out one fire after another. The opposition Progressive Liberal Party has ramped up its campaign to discredit their opponents. The question is there any real material benefit for voters in all of this? Are we still only living in 5-year cycles? Tonight we ask, are we seeing real progress or is it more of the same? It's all on the record tonight. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer, and our discussion begins on the other side of this break.
Matt, where in the world is Matt Lauer? Where in the world is Ellison Greenslade? Answer these about the low value of cottage in Atlanta. So we can talk about it.
More on the record tonight. The government's purchase of the Grand Lukine is a hot subject in the news. We're going to And welcome back to On the Record. Whenever there is a hint of trouble with any government, the media lines up, a magnifying glass in hand, and the onslaught begins. The endless opinion pieces, talk shows are lit up as well with callers. The opposition springs into action, and social media is all the rage. With so much noise, the public can barely make sense of what to make and what to believe, or what to make of it all and what to believe. Tonight we ask, are we seeing real progress or is it more of the same? Very happy to have as my guest tonight Mark Humes. He's the MP for Fort Charlotte and chairman of the Bahamas Agricultural Health and Food Safety Authority, along with Mr. Barry Griffin. He's a member of the PLP's Leadership Council. Gentlemen, welcome to On the Record.
Thank you very much.
Mark is my MP. Good to see you.
Thank you so very much. Good to be here.
I have no list of concerns at this point outside of the national concerns. But first of all, I want to take just a moment to say this too. I know that you do head the committee that that oversees the Independence celebrations.
Yes,
and by all accounts, the celebrations went very well.
Thank you.
There was a lot of positive feedback. And I really have to say that I was one who was very skeptical. I don't go. Not that I'm not patriotic, but I thought,
Right.
more of the same. But people really enjoyed it, particularly the cultural show and some of the activities. Congratulations, job
Thank
well
you
done.
so very much. Thank you so very. It's always a pleasure to hear these comments. The committee works extremely hard. I've chaired it for 3 years, and we've worked extremely hard to try and make the Independence celebration a lot more engaging for the Bahamian public, and particularly our youth. The aim was to get our young people back into the celebrations again, and to make it an event that we will all be proud of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm hoping that we're achieving that goal.
Great. And finally, the mural, the thing that you all had in Parliament
Yes.
Square, I loved it.
Yes.
It's the first time I could really say I looked at something for independence, because usually I think they're tacky and ugly. But I really thought it was nice. I was taken by it when I drove past. So
we charge, thank you so very much. We have, like I said, we have an incredible team of decorators. We have an incredible team of innovators. And the only thing I charge them with is to be creative,
Yeah, it
to
went
show
well.
their creativity.
And tourists, every day I pass a tourist where they're taking photos with them. And
Yes.
so anyway, but that's done. So, you know, we'll see what happens next year.
Thank you.
So, Mark, since this is your first time on the show, you already got the first word, but we're going to deal right in. Today we're going to talk about really, are we really making progress in the country as a people? Are we making progress, or is it more of the same? And when I say more of the same, we're in a perpetual 5-year cycle, and we have been.
Right.
You know, your body's in today, PLB was in previously, who knows what's going to happen at the next election. But, you know, a lot of people are asking, are we moving, are we making any progress, what's really happening? And as soon as the governing party becomes opposition, you know, you hear so much of the same,
Right.
by some estimations. Start with you. What are some of the things that you would say your party and the governing party has accomplished to date since coming to office?
Sure. Well, one of the first things I would say we've done is arrested our free fall, economic free fall. Again, you know, looking at the past administration's management of our country's finances, it didn't go well at all. And when you look at the fact that we had 4, you know, downgrades, you know, our country, the confidence that investors had in our country, that had sort of fallen off as well. So we've arrested the economic free fall that we were in. I think the other day there was a report that our debt, national debt, had dropped by 31 million as well. Again, all accounts is that we are, by the credit rating agencies, that we are now stable. Once again, I think we were junk bond a few years ago, and all of this was done in 2 short years. One of the Prime Minister's mandates before coming into office was the Over the Hill Redevelopment Initiative. And it wasn't very long after we came to office that we began that project. You go through all of the inner city areas and you'll see Centerville, Baintown in particular, Centerville, in the Angliston, St. Barnabas area, you'll see those initiatives and the cleanup that's taking place in the area. The economic empowerment zones that we've created so that we could, again, to empower individuals in those areas to redevelop, to start new businesses. You would have heard the $8 million has been allocated to the new initiative, the Small Business Development Initiative. So we've done quite a bit, not just to arrest the economic freefall, but also to begin the process of empowering individuals in the country to start their own businesses. We understand that small business is the backbone of any economy. And you know, among all of these things, in order for us to continue to grow, we need to empower individuals to become less dependent on government. We've created a welfare system in this country that is, you know, the roots are growing very deep, and we have to pull them out again. And you'll see how we've been working on that. And the last thing, when you look at the tourism sector of our economy, it's on fire. I guess that's the shortest thing we can say.
In a good way.
It's on fire in an excellent way. Not just in New Providence alone. You hear the numbers, the increasing numbers of visitors in the family of islands, Exuma, Eleuthera, Abaco, even in Grand Bahama. So things are slowly starting to turn around in the country, despite the noise. Things are slowly starting to turn around.
Barry, the response?
I don't mean to put a damper on Mr. Humes' sort of optimism.
We're here to debate.
Yeah, but I think if you speak to Bahamians across the board, regular Bahamians who live in this country day in, day out, I don't think they share the same optimism. I think if you would have asked that question perhaps a year ago, people may have been a bit concerned that the government wasn't doing anything. But right now, I feel as though the Bahamian people are pretty cemented in their minds that the present administration is a failure. I don't think there are any accomplishments to speak of. I think they have failed to stem the tide of corruption that they spoke about. You see a lot of instances where deals seem to be not transparent, not above board. The economic activity that Mr. Hume speaks of, I think if you talk to regular Bahamians, they don't feel it. And so you see the numbers that are being printed in the newspapers. You hear about the tourist arrivals, and you hear about these things, but when you actually speak to Bahamians on the ground, they don't feel it. And so that says something about the system. He talks about the welfare state. I think Bahamians are slowly realizing that the people who benefit from the welfare of the government are the 1% in this country who seem to get all of the contracts, all of the concessions, and it's a perpetual cycle in which the same people seem to be the benefactors of the largesse of the government. So I think it's unfair to characterize things as, so optimistic when, to be quite honest, regular Bahamians don't feel that way. So in terms of any accomplishments that this government would have had, I say you'd be hard-pressed to find a regular average Joe who will laud this government and say that they've been successful.
Yeah, see, here's the thing, Mr. Sawyer. It's not about feelings, it's about facts. And the fact says that the economy is improving. I mean, you can't run away from that. It's a factual thing. So we're not dealing with feelings here. And I think when we look at these matters, too many of us are driven by our feelings and emotions, and we miss the facts. The facts are real. The facts about the tourism, the growth in tourism, it's real. The facts about what's happening with the small business development, it's real. The concessions that we have given to Bahamians so that they don't, it's not money on the ground, but it's money in their pockets. It's real. This is what we're talking about. If you were to go by feelings, yes, I feel that we could do better. But I understand that we are doing well and we're getting better. That's fact. So when we look at these matters and we look at, we're being criticized by a government that in several administrations failed to govern well. And that's why in most instances, we're in this trouble that we're in today. When you criticize, you should be able to criticize based on your accomplishments. And so if Mr. Malcolm, in criticizing the efforts of this government to get things on track, would lay on the line the accomplishments of the Progressive Liberal Party at the same time, because what I'm talking about are the accomplishments of the Free National Movement. If he were to lay on the table at the same time in criticizing us the facts, then we could have a conversation. And I've said it several times.
But to your point.
Before you move on,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Let's say what's real.
Okay.
He said facts.
Right.
The fact is, Bahamians aren't doing well. The fact is, people do not have money in their pockets. The fact is, Bahamians are suffering. That's the facts. And so when you want to talk about facts and you look at the numbers, you have to say, okay, the economy is doing well. What is your definition of the economy is doing well? Is it the same 1% reaping profits, and so on their spreadsheets and their balance sheets look good? If that's your perception of doing well, then perhaps you can say that. But for me, as a young person, I think we will judge this government and any government on how the masses are doing.
Okay, so I'm glad you, since we're talking about that 1% did not, as you claim, and Mark, that is a reality for many people.
Yes.
People see just that 1% of that top doing extremely well and continuing to do. They didn't just start doing well. They have been doing well for a long time. So then, back to my topic, is it more of the same? They have been doing well.
Yes.
These things have been happening. People have been catching hell.
Yes.
This welfare state that you speak of has been in existence. These things have been, they did not, I'm not here to take any particular side, but this is not something that began today, yesterday, or even 2-3 years ago.
And I think it's important for Mr. Malcolm to understand, Mr. Griffin, excuse me.
Yes.
I think it's important for Mr. Griffin to understand that of the 57 years, I think it is, that we've been a majority rule nation, 35 of those years have been under PLP rule. PLP would have had a 35-year head start to make things better for people in our country.
But Mark, we're in 2019. People are not concerned about what happened in the past.
See, but here's one of the things you have to understand, and this is what they're good at. When they cannot keep up with the conversation or the story, they change the conversation. But you have to remind them that, again, we just came out of 5 years where people were doing worse than they're doing now. Things are improving. We have some members of parliament that have been, who represent over the hill areas, that have been in government for upwards of 20 years representing their areas. And their areas are still in a state that they're now still looking for help. 20 years, Angliston, Centerville, had a representative who boasted that 40 years they were in government for 40 years. Look at the condition of Centerville. Look at the condition of the lives of most of the individuals who have supported the PLP loyally. So when we talk about people are suffering, yes they are. PLPs are the champion of the poor. In order to be a champion of something, you have to have it. So if they're the champion of the poor, perhaps it's because they want to keep people poor to keep being the champions of the poor.
So he speaks about the time that the PLP was in power for so long. The last 20 years, the FNM has been in power for longer than the PLP. And so when you talk about modern times in the Bahamas, the FNM has governed for more time than the PLP. What has the FNM done in the last 20 years to stem what they say the PLP has created and fostered? So what you see is, I think, this government is very good at the blame game. When you talk about their accomplishments or what they're doing in government, the story always goes back to the PLP. What you see now on the ground is that the people are tired of this blame game. They're asking, no, you are now the government, we voted for you, what are you doing? So you speak about Angliston, you speak about Centerville. What has improved over the last 20 years under majority FNM rule? What is improving now? Because let me tell you, you go into Angliston now, you go into Centerville, they're ready to get rid of this government.
Yeah, so let's look at what has improved. When we look at the airwaves in this country, this is under the Free National Movement government. And every time the Free National Movement government takes control of the country, socio-economically, the country progresses. The infrastructural works of the country in the last 20 years under the Free National Movement has improved tremendously. The opening of the airways, the liberties that we now have are as a result of the Free National Movement government. Right now, we're in the family of islands, putting in infrastructure for water and the likes and electricity. So again, each time that the FreeNat or the Progressive Liberal Party, and I can list the accomplishments, most of them that we complete because they're unable to do it. When you look at the sporting facilities that we have there, Bahama, they just barely opened it, but when you look at the first time, they failed at getting it started in the 2002 to 2007 their time in office, and Mr. Ingram had to come in and complete the deal. Excuse me. So when we look at the FNM's time in office, you may not like some of the attitudes that you get, but things move in the country. And we don't have enough time in the show to list all of the accomplishments that takes place under the FNM government. And every time they receive the government from us, the government is in the economy is stable or doing well. Each time we receive it back from them, it's, again, last time, junk status. This Progressive Liberal Party government, 3 successive administrations, the last years of the Progressive Liberal Party under Sir Lyndon, the 2 terms under Christie, the country, they have brought the country to international shame. So when we look at their time in office versus our time in office, there's no comparison. There may be some things you don't like that the FNM does, but we've never, in any instance that I can remember, brought this country to international disrepute.
We go to the break, Barry. You have 1 minute.
Before the break.
Yes.
Mr. Humes, I think he has a misconceived recollection of history. Speaking about bringing the country to international shame, it's this current prime minister who went around the world disgracing and embarrassing our country by calling it a corrupt nation. And now we see that international investors who enter this country, they have no respect for the office of the prime minister and no respect for Bahamians at large. If we remember a few months ago, it was the Bahamas head of RBC who spoke very ill of Bahamian workers. And now we see now with the BTC debacle, again, you have foreign investors who speak ill of the office of the prime minister and that of Bahamian workers. What we have when the FNM comes in power, they embarrass the nation and they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to use the word, but they allow certain, I don't want to interest, the 1%, to feel as though they can do anything in this country and get away with it. What we have is that regular Bahamians are not doing well under this government. And to go back to, in terms of talking about the 35 years that the PLP was in power and certain entrenched interests having those interests, what we see now is every deal when the FNM comes in, the same entrenched interests, they're back at the table. And so you talk about these infrastructure projects. Every time the FNM is in power, these deals are shrouded in controversy and shrouded in conflict of interest. So that's what we need to talk about, Jerome.
Gentlemen, we're at the point of our first break of the show. This is quite an exciting discussion. Stay with us. On the Record, we'll be back right after this.
$136,000 cash back from Rev is here. Want your share? Simply pay your bill in full by 8 p.m. on the 27th of the month. Register for and update your contacts in My Account online at www.cablebahamas.com and call or email us at Rev to register for your e-bill. You can visit and pay at All Alive, Rev, Cash and Go locations, participating banks, or online with a debit or credit card through My Account on cablebahamas.com. Easy. 608 winners sharing $136,000 cash back in a year. Call 601-2200, 602-8800 for Grand Bahama, 300-2200 for Family Islands, or WhatsApp 738-9060 now. Or email info@cablebahamas.com to see how you can win big all year long with $136,000 cash back. Rev, you and us together. Terms and conditions apply.
This portion of On the Record is brought to you by Generali Insurance Company Limited, your employee benefit specialist.
The job of government is to make decisions on behalf of the people, and the opposition should always keep them accountable. But politics is a place where accusations and mudslinging abound. How are we to make sense of it all? Is anything actually getting done, or are there merely smoke screens being created to keep us distracted? Tonight we ask, are we seeing real progress, or is it more of the same? My guest, Mark Humes, he's the MP for Fort Charlotte, also the chairman of the Bahamas Agricultural, Health and Food Safety Authority, as well as Barry Griffin, a member of the Progressive Liberal Party's Leadership Council. Gentlemen, just recently we would have seen the resignation of a cabinet minister, the Minister for Immigration and Financial Services, in the person of Brent Simonet. Second time he would have resigned from a Free National Movement cabinet. His resignation became effective, I think, the 1st of this month. He says, because of his retirement, he's at retirement age and it's the right thing to do. But prior to that, there was a controversy over a contract awarded to Bahamas Hot Mix from the airport, from NAD, for repairs to the runway for Bahamas Hot Mix, which is a company that he has interest in. He has since said that his children have interest in that company. He does not. He declared no direct investment in the company. Mark, I'm going to begin with you. That, whether real or perceived, is an issue. The 1% that Barry spoke of in the last segment, Mr. Simonet and his family are in that 1%. People see him and his family as benefiting from that. His resignation began almost a firestorm of some other things. How has that, give us an explanation from where you sit, or how do you justify, well, not justify, well, how do you speak to that? Let me start there.
Well, the only thing I can say is Mr. Simonet said that he had always intended to resign at 65, I think
Right.
it was. And, you know, I would not want to question or second guess whether or not that was his intention. He said that quite a bit. You know, one of the things you'd recognize, and I hear Mr. Malcolm talk about Griffin. Right? Barry Malcolm, I'm thinking, Mr. Griffin, say, he speaks quite a bit about the 1%ers. And the 1%ers on both sides. You know, they're not only on the F&M side, they're quite a bit on the Free National Movement side. There are quite a number of them who are in partnership together.
I mean,
And-
1%, you said, on the FNM.
Well, I'm saying, I'm looking at this 1%.
And the PLP is what
They're
you're
on
trying to
both
say.
sides.
Oh, okay. All right.
You know, when we look at, you know, we're talking about conflict of interest. This was the first time that we had brought, or any party or any government had brought such a matter to the House of Assembly. And I think sometimes you have to give credit where credit is due. This morning's, one of the journals this morning speaks about a $11 million contract that would have been awarded to a sitting cabinet minister of the Progressive Liberal Party government as well. When you look at, again, the former Attorney General's interest, I think, in some stores that in Bahama during the process when negotiations were taking place to complete that deal. When you look at another sitting cabinet minister who had an issue that came to light about his father's involvement with Bahama, the Bahama property as well. So it's easy to single out Mr. Simonet on all sides. I've seen there's a member of the, again, he's not a cabinet minister, but is a high-ranking member of the Progressive Liberal Party who's also involved in land issues as well. So these things take place across the board. And so it's very, you know, we have to be very careful how we sort of throw rocks at someone else's glass house.
But are you satisfied that the response has been adequate, or that
The response from
government, and are you satisfied with how this is played out? From your side, you are okay, sort of okay.
Well, I
Mr. Simonet said this, so we're okay.
I look at how it played out. Again, the matter was brought. The Constitution sort of makes provision for these conflict of interest scenarios. So to make a big deal out of a conflict of interest issue, then the framers must have understood. The framers of the Constitution must have understood at some point there would be these matters that arise. That's why they put that clause in the Constitution. And because that provision is there, then I have to look at it sort of logically and say, well, someone must have understood that these things would arise. However, if they were to arise, it outlines the process by which you should address that matter.
Are you satisfied that was
And I
addressed?
think we addressed it in such a way. I know people are saying that it should have been done, his declaration should have been done prior to the tabling. But the Constitution also says as soon as practical thereafter. You know, and that word right there, I think it's as soon as practical after, with something to that effect. That's left up to sort of an interpretation as to when it should happen soon after. And because I look at these things, I'm saying, you know, there's an allowance. Now, has it done, what's the damage that's been done to, because we must act in the interest of the Bahamian people. When you look at the state of those persons who were working in the post office prior and the need to get them into a healthy environment, you have to act in the interest, the best interest of the Bahamian people.
We're talking post office now. Barry, go ahead.
So, in a nutshell, I guess Mr. Humes' answer to your question is it's more of the same. He listed a long list of things that he perceived to be conflicts of interest in the PLP government in a way to explain the conflict of interest now in the F&M government. And so, by his own admittance, he says more of the same. As a young person sitting here, whether it's a perceived PLP or F&M conflict of interest, they're all wrong. We won't sit and try and justify anything, but a lot of the instances that he even listed in talking about PLP, perceived conflict of interest, really aren't. The papers today for this morning talked about Dr. Dovell and his family's interests. A statement has been released. Dr. Dovell never had and doesn't have now an interest in any lease or any building. It was his father and his brother. That's completely different from the Brent Simonet situation where he's declared as an owner of the Town Center Mall, where also in the hot mix instances of the past where his children, his immediate family are owners or benefactors of that. So in the instance of Dr. Dovell, it wasn't a conflict of interest. Here, it's a clear conflict of interest. And what you see now is a pattern of behavior where it seems that certain F&M MPs come into power, they gain some benefit from being in government, and they resign. So are the Bahamian people satisfied with the resignation? I say no.
Well, you know, when we say more of the same, I think I sort of highlighted where it was not more of the same, because this is the first time, you know, if I can remember, and I will excuse his youthfulness, you know, and the likes in these matters, but we brought a resolution to the House as per the Constitution. It's not more of the same. This is the first time that it was done. Again, this is the F&M's attempt at being transparent as per the law. So I understand what the gentleman is saying here. And everybody can say they don't have an interest, but it's the perception, like you started off with as well. It's the perception, and you may be correct. It doesn't look good, but the Constitution makes a provision that in these instances, this is a process by which it should be addressed. Now, again, we're going by perception. And when you look around us, there are a lot of things that take place in our society that perceptually is not correct. There are many things.
No, just let me
Go
get
ahead.
there.
I want to address this.
First of all, I'll excuse his very patronizing comment about my youth that has no place at the table here. Okay. But what I would say is that I'm not sure if this was the first time that sort of resolution was brought to the table, but what we see is a pattern where the F&M does things and then later on things come to light. What that resolution says is that Brent Simonet never discussed anything about that transaction with the Prime Minister or the Cabinet. What was revealed afterwards by Mr. Simonet himself was that in fact, particulars of the agreement were discussed. And so what you have is, you have perhaps a sitting member of cabinet and a sitting prime minister potentially misleading Parliament.
Okay, so let's look at some of the facts here. Mr. Simonet was always known to have 50% or ownership in Town Centre Mall. It is a fact that the post office had the situation had to be addressed. Town Centre Mall was not the only option. Phil's, the facility on Gladstone Road was looked at. It was determined that it was not suitable. However, the person who was responsible for assessing just recently said that he was surprised that it went to Town Centre Mall, as he thought that Phil's would have been a suitable site. However, the Public Service Minister, Brenzel Roll, went on recently on record saying that it was not suitable because there were issues with the electrical work, plumbing issues, even concerns about the second floor. Former Minister Alfred Sayers has brought this whole question of whether Parliament was misled based upon Mr. Simonet's own admission on a radio show that the Prime Minister called him and said, hey, we're going to go ahead with the deal. This is what we are going to, this is what we're looking at, I think, in terms of the square footage and the cost per square footage on the rental. However, it was also noted that when the issue arose at the cabinet level, when it first arose at the cabinet level, when it was determined that Phil's would not be the site, Mr. Simonet was asked to leave the cabinet room so the discussion could happen on what would take place. Again, cost of the lease is about $200,000 less than what was originally quoted because they're using less space. Fact, the old post office is deplorable. Employees could not work. It was not functioning. Now, we have found ourselves embroiled in a controversy about something that had to happen. Did the F&M mishandle it? Was this the best and only alternative? Was it, the best or only choice at the time? And then let's delve into the question of, is it more important to deal with reality, or do you spend time dealing with the perception? Mark, the perception is that there was a conflict of interest. There is the perception that this deal should not have happened, that something has gone wrong. There is even now the question of whether Parliament was misled.
Sure. And again, I understand the idea of the perception. I think I addressed that. And I said again that the Constitution makes an allowance for this to happen. We've never really addressed it in this manner before, and now that we're addressing it in this manner, we have to look at the fact that the Constitution makes provision for these perceived conflict of interest. One. When we look at what was said as to whether Parliament was misled, Mr. Simonet, yes, he in his radio show appearance did note that he and the Prime Minister spoke. But we have to look at what the resolution said. Was the decision to move, was the cabinet decision to move to the post office, was the decision made prior to the discussion or the conversation, I wouldn't say discussion, to the conversation with Mr. Simonet? If it was made before the conversation with Mr. Simonet, then I would think, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I would think that he was in bounds as per what was tabled. If in the conversation, Mr. Simonet, Dr. Minnis, Prime Minister Minnis, had indicated to Mr. Simonet that this is what they're going to do, Mr. Simonet could have immediately said, well, deal with this, because I cannot be in it. We're not privy to what that conversation was. And to make any assumption as to what the conversation was.
Mr. Simonet was the one who said, who gave details of the conversation.
Well, I don't think did he speak? Well, see, again, I'm not aware of whether or not they discussed the details as to and if Dr. Minnis, if Prime Minister Minnis had given him the details, again, he could have put that on to whoever would have finalized the contract with the cabinet. But to say, again, that he misled, I don't think that the Parliament was misled. As it relates to as it relates to the right place, no, we had other options. And I think you stated that. However, when we look at where Phil's is located, versus the town center mall, when we look at who it is that we're catering to, who would make use of the post office more, I think not only the structural issues that came to light, you said Minister Rold spoke of, but also when you look at the ability of individuals to get to Phil's, to retrieve their posts, their mails and the likes, to do business at the post office, it would have been a lot less convenient for the average Bahamian person. The town center mall is centrally located. It's on the bus routes. All roads can lead to town center mall. So when you look at, again, in the best interests of the Bahamian people, the town center mall was an excellent choice. The Progressive Liberal Party government was also building a post office facility in the very same vicinity.
The old independent shopping center.
The very same vicinity. Again, that was shrouded in conflict because of a perceived conflict of interest at the time as well. And they approached Mr. Simonet as well, looking into the use of the town center mall. And so when we look at this situation holistically, I believe that the matter, there was no misleading. And again, when we look at the law, letter of the law, not our interpretation or perception of the law, the letter of the law, then it may not. I don't think that there was misleading of anyone in this situation. When you look at whether or not this is the best location for the Bahamian people, I think it's very convenient for all. And again, when we look at all of these matters holistically, all governments have done business with Mr. Simonet, whether it's Bahama Hot Mix, whether it's Town Center Mall. This isn't the first time that a government has had their operations in the Town Center Mall.
Jerome, when you look at the letter and the spirit of the law as it relates to conflict of interest provisions, it's clear that Mr. Simonet should not have had any discussion with the Prime Minister or members of Cabinet in relation to the lease of the building. What is clear from Mr. Simonet's own admission is that he did. Conflict of interest, period. This government campaigned on transparency, on getting rid of corruption, and what we're seeing now is that it's essentially more of the same. It was just election talk. So I think the Bahamian people are more disappointed in the fact that they voted for one thing or something that they perceived would be happening, and here they have, members of the government now having to go out into the press and defend this action. Governments can do business with Mr. Simonet, but the fact is he cannot be a sitting member of cabinet when that happens.
I go
But
back.
I do want to before we go.
Yes, but I do
go
go back, Mrs. Sorry, I do go back to the fact that the Constitution makes a provision. So for the gentleman to say that they should not be doing business is inaccurate. So I think.
Okay. So here's the issue. Here's the issue. Many times, and this is both parties.
Yes.
You have men and women of great wealth who sit in Parliament. It is almost unavoidable for government not to do business because, again, if we're talking about that 1%, there's land, there's buildings, there are opportunities, there's services, etc., that people in business people get into politics who then get into cabinet. Because we are a small country, and because we are oftentimes limited in what we're tapping into, this issue arises. It's not the first time, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last time. The problem then becomes with all of this, though, at the end of the day, is how transparent it is.
Yes.
And what is the perception that the public
Yes,
is left
sure.
with at the end of the day. And that, gentlemen, is where the issue is. And not on, just want to say this as well, because it has happened over and over again. This is not the first time this has happened.
But here's the thing. I think it goes down also to the question of judgment. The Bahamian people would like to know that they can elect officials who they can trust their judgment. You are the government that campaigned on transparency. Was it good judgment to have these conversations? Was it good judgment to enter this lease? And I think you would see that members of Mr. Humes' own party voted against this. Those persons should be lauded for the fact that they saw the conflict of interest or the potential and they decided to go against their party. I think every single member of the Free National Movement would need to answer the question of judgment.
Gentlemen, we're going to have to take a break at this point. Stay with us. If you are enjoying our discussion here on the record, our show continues right after. Hello and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true, and open debate they've been looking for.
And the icon goes to On the Record.
On the Record was born out of a desire to do something different. What we do every day helps our country, it helps our society, it helps to shape the views and opinions.
Listen, what is more dangerous than
Gentlemen, we've got to move very quickly. Let's wrap up.
integrity?
It's all on the record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break. And we are back. Political polarization has eased up very little since the elections. Despite calls for unity just recently during the independence celebrations, Bahamians continue to line up behind party colors and ideologies. On a few occasions, do you see, or on few occasions, do we really see any real agreement between the PLP and the FNM? Tonight, we're asking, are we seeing real progress or is it more of the same? Gentlemen, there are a few times that we seem to agree on anything. There was a lot of, I call it political mudslinging going on. And we are still a ways out from election. But there are, of course, indicators that election is in the air. Barry, I'm going to turn now to the PLP. Just recently, the leader of the PLP, Philip Brave Davis, at a party gathering of stalwarts, Grand Bahama says he expects no challenges within the leadership race, and almost telling people, I expect the slate of party officers to go in unopposed. However, there are rustlings in the wind that Obi Wilshcombe will be vying for the chairmanship, and Ricardo Smith may even be challenging Chester Cooper for deputy leader. But I want to talk a little bit about Mr. Davis's comments. As a member of the Leadership Council, when he says that, what message does that really send?
Well, first of all, I want to say that the PLP is gearing up for an exciting convention that we're going to have next week, Thursday and Friday, at the Malia.
Shameless plug, go ahead.
Shameless plug, but I want to give you a context.
Sure.
What you see happening now in the PLP are structural changes that, as a young person, I'm very proud of. We've had 3 conventions over the last 3 years. That's after a period of not having a convention for almost 9 years. And so any insinuation that democracy is not alive in the PLP, I just want to get rid of that perception. Democracy is alive. Mr. Davis was challenged at the last convention. Mr. Cooper was challenged at the last convention. So democracy is very alive. And again, any rank and file member, as you can see, is free to challenge any position. Now, Mr. Davis is someone who has worked tirelessly to sort of reform the PLP. And I think he's well within his right to say, the stars are showing that we are heading in the right direction. The winds are with our sail, and so I would like you to continue to repose that confidence in me and my team. And so I think that's what you would expect of anyone going into a convention, to say, hey, we're doing good. I trust this team, support. But on the same note, I think Mr. Davis knows, and everyone in the party knows, that the PLP is the party of democracy, and there may be challenges. But right now we're having a convention, and so Mr. Davis is on the campaign trail, and he's essentially rallying the troops.
Mark, you, from the outside, you're looking in, and people always tell me, I get into the PLP business, but you hear a statement like that, I don't expect any challenges. What does that say to you, even as a governing party, as a member of the FNM? You're sort of looking at the PLP. I always say opposition politics is always so much more exciting because there's always the potential for so much more to happen.
Right. Well, again, I don't want to say I'm not going to get into PLP's politics, but again, we're talking about democracy. If the party is a party of democracy, you should welcome anybody to step forward and challenge. This is what it's all about. The best person leads at the end of the day. But Mr. Davis, I guess, like the gentleman says, is well within his rights to say that. But at the end of the day, because it is a democracy, if persons want to challenge, they should be afforded that opportunity. Hopefully it wasn't a threat of intimidation. It wasn't a means of intimidating anybody from stepping up. But again, people should be allowed, and it should be a welcome, because you understand, if you've done such a good job, that you welcome anybody and you put your record against theirs.
Was that perceived as a threat, though? I mean, that's a valid point. That people may have been sitting there thinking, well, I was going to offer myself, but since he says that.
I mean, that's the first time I've seen it sort of shrouded in that sort of perception.
Okay.
I don't think anyone would have taken it as a threat. It's essentially Mr. Davis saying, I'm leader of this ship, and this is my team. And just to clarify his comments, he said he doesn't expect any challenge to the position of leader.
Right.
And what he's saying is, this is my team, and so if you support me as leader, I don't expect any challenges to my team. This is the team I'm sort of bringing in. But again, like I said, the PLP is a party of democracy. The convention committee is planning for all eventualities in terms of challenges, and so anyone is welcome to challenge any position on the floor at our convention.
The FNM has accused the PLP of launching an unprecedented campaign to attack any and all signs of progress in the country. Is that, or how do you respond to that?
Do you want me to laugh?
I want you to respond.
I think he would need to sort of
first of all, is that from the PLP, that's an accusation levied against the PLP. Are you attacking all progress in the country?
And I think what we've seen is the PLP parliamentarians in Parliament have been very constructive. You don't have a situation where, for example, it's like the Republicans who sort of say no to everything. The PLP has voted for and in favor of many bills that this present government has presented. What we do not do is we do not go against anything that's against our philosophy as a party. So things like the conflict of interest, we did not support that resolution for right reason, and we're seeing why. And so we're not impeding any progress. We just want the progress to be in the right direction.
But there's a lot of, almost daily, there is a statement of criticism or response to something coming
because
from
this
the PLP.
government on a daily basis lets down the Bahamian people. You want to talk about accomplishments and failures, I think that this government is showing that they can't sort of do the basic functions of government. What you see now is, for example, they fired over 5,000 Bahamians, yet many government employees still complain that they can't get paid on time. So little things like that. I mean, the government can't keep the power on, for example. So, we are doing the job of the opposition. We're keeping the fire to their feet.
Yes, you know, and this is very interesting to hear. When we look again, I go right back
Is he going to go back to another PLP era instead of talking about something in relation to the FNM?
Because when we talk about giving advice or going in the right direction, the question is, does the PLP have the moral authority based on their experience in government, as a government, to say what is the right direction? In no administration that they've had from 2007 to 2002 to 2007, they didn't take the country in the right direction. From 2012 to 2017, they didn't take the country in the right direction. How then do we trust their advice on what is the right direction? They've not, in all of their experience and governance, has not taken this country in any right direction. When we talk about terminations, again, when we look at the conditions of the lives of our people under the Progressive Liberal Party, they've not taken us in the right direction. How do they then have the moral authority to say this is the direction that you should go? If we were to, I think what you see, and I've said it again, under every successive administration, the FNM administration, the country, social, economically, has progressed. And what is good, see what we have here again, they're very good in opposition. The Progressive Liberal Party is extremely good in opposition. What they have not proven is that they're good in governance. What we have recognized with the FNM government, again, there are things that you may not like the way we do certain things, but we get things done. What I would like to hear from the gentleman is, what is the record of the PLP that says that they are good at governing? What I would like to hear are some of their major accomplishments that they can speak about that sort of progressed us socially and economically as a nation.
All right, just wait.
Again, like I said, the FNM, and I see a lot of members of parliament, they like to put the glaring focus back on the PLP, again, because I think the people have spoken that they aren't doing anything in government. And so it's easy to put the light on the opposition. The reality is...
The question is here
I'm
is,
speaking,
what
sorry.
The
reality is we are the opposition. They are in government. And I'll go back to my statement. Since 1992, the FNM has been in power more than the PLP. He talks about the PLP not taking the country in the right direction. The FNM was voted in 2002, voted out of the country in 2002. The FNM was voted out after 2012. So what it shows is that the Bahamian people do not repose any sort of long-term trust in the FNM government because they are not taking the country in the right direction.
In all fairness, you could say that we have been a revolving country of government.
And so my point is, the FNM doesn't have any sort of moral or any other authority to say that the Bahamian people have some sort of bigger trust in their party.
At the end of the day, the question is, I understand you want to, again, because you want to go back to the FNM. The question is, what are the PLP's major social and economic achievements, accomplishments.
The middle class in this country was created by the PLP. The PLP created the College of the Bahamas. The PLP created the University of the Bahamas. The PLP started a new industry in this country in terms of agriculture. Everything you see with BAIC and everything that you're representing in terms of being chairman of agricultural issues in this country is because of the PLP. The PLP continuously empowers people in this country. We move forward. Before the PLP left government, we had plans in place for a national health insurance that this government is not moving forward on. The PLP is the party of progress, the party of big ideas. What we see is this party, when they come in
Mark,
power,
very
they
quickly,
recede.
we've got to address this as well. One of the great criticisms, one of the things that pains people daily, all of us, is a situation regarding BPL and what has happened. That is, the electricity bills, the lack of continuous service is a stain. That is an issue. And people are angry about it. And I'm sure you hear it every day. How do you respond particularly to that? That is at your feet.
Sure, it is. But I just want to address
We're running out of time.
Sure. I just want to address the matter of agriculture. BAMSI, again, ended in controversy again. BAIC, shrouded in controversy again. University of the Bahamas is still on its way up, and in particular, under this administration. What the gentleman is speaking about, again, yes, it's great to have big ideas, but it's even better to finish and complete those ideas.
Let's talk with BPL.
So here's with BPL. Again, BPL has been having issues for many years. This administration has taken the step to bring in new equipment to enhance the product. What we have here, and again, in the process of changing over from what we had, the equipment that we had, to the new equipment that we're now bringing in, there has to be we're going to lose some sort of energy generation in that process. The only way that we can manage that process is by shedding in different areas at different times. What we're looking at, though, is once this process is complete, the result on the Bahamian community, on the Bahamian population in general, particularly here in New Providence. It's about having a little patience. Again, we took the step to get the new equipment in, the new generators in, so that we can start to bring relief to the Bahamian people.
Again, we had, before you respond, it goes back to this problem did not just start, and it sits at the feet of every administration, Barry. Every administration has failed us when it comes to being able to provide power, particularly in a growing country, growing population, growing economy.
Yes, and Mr. Humes likes to sort of paint the FNM as this sort of party of execution. So in one mouth he's saying, we're the party that does things, we execute, we do these things. And now it's sort of backtracking to say, well hold on, this is the problem that the last administration did, we need time. And so I think it's showing that it's essentially more of the same. The FNM isn't sort of the party that gets things done. The reality on the ground is, and I have to bring it back to the ground, because when you talk about these things conceptually and intellectually, you forget that every single day you have businesses that have to deal with power outages. You have homes that deal with power outages. Just on the news the other day, you saw the old folks home that is lamenting the fact that we can't properly care for people with these issues. The reality is they are in the seat of government, and the Bahamian people need relief.
Gentlemen, we have to take our final break. You're watching On the Record. Our final segment is right after this break.
$136,000 cash back from Rev is here. Want your share? Simply pay your bill in full by 8 p.m. on the 27th of the month. 50 winners of $200 every month for 12 months. And that's not all. One winner of $1,000 every 3 months, one winner of $2,000 every 6 months, one winner of $3,000 in 9 months, and one winner of $5,000 in 12 months. That's 608 winners sharing $136,000 cash back in a year. Call 601-2200, 602-8800 for Grand Bahama, 800-300-2200 for Family Islands or WhatsApp 738-9060 now or email info@cablebahamas.com to see how you can win big all year long with $136,000 cashback. Rev. You and us together. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello and welcome to On the Record, and the balanced, true, and open debate you've been looking for. This is our final segment tonight. We're asking, are we seeing real progress or is it more of the same? My guest, Mark Humes, he's the MP for Fort Charlotte, as well as the chairman of the Bahamas Agricultural Health and Food Safety Authority, as well as Barry Griffin. He's a member of the PLP's Leadership Council. Barry, I'm going to start with you. We're just about out of time. Okay. Back to our topic. Are we making real progress or is it just more of the same?
Jerome, I think, in my opinion, and if you talk to most Bahamians, I think what you have is an overall dissatisfaction and displeasure with what has happened in government over the last 2 years, going on 2.5 years. I think you would have seen that people would have given the FNM a chance and say, wait, let's see what they're going to do. But generally, I feel like Bahamians generally are at the point where they're dissatisfied, they're displeased, and they're ready for a new government. What I will say is that we understand that there was also dissatisfaction with the PLP, but I think what you have now is the Bahamian people are seeing the PLP making the strides and structural changes to become that party once again that the Bahamian people can believe in. We had a meeting that was about 2 days ago, and when I say a meeting, it was literally a special called meeting. And when you walked into that yard at the PLP headquarters, you had an overflow of people. You could almost imagine that we sort of bid it as a rally. So what that is telling me is that the Bahamian people are now once again looking at the PLP and waiting to hear our plans because they want to get rid of this government.
Mark?
Yes. Mr. Griffin is correct. People have been dissatisfied with government for quite some time now. In 2 short years, the FNM government has come in and again stabilized our the economy of the country. The FNM government in this short period of time, this new administration in this short period of time, has also garnered garnered our investors' interest again. Confidence in the Bahamas once again. You see this not just in all of the number of anchor projects that are on the way back to the country, but you see it in the visitors that are now coming to our shores. Over 50% of our population is employed in the tourism sector, and therefore there's a good number of those individuals who are also doing well. You see it in the investments in the young people in this country through the small business development venture, through our over-the-hill development initiatives. Again, it is a short time. But one thing, like I've said, with all FNM administrations that have been in office and in governance, they've made drastic socio-economic progress during their time in office. What we recognize as the Progressive Liberal Party, in none of theirs have done that. And what we need, and the confidence that we would have that they will come in again and do it is very nil. Bahamian people have to ask themselves, if you get rid of the FNM, despite how you dress up, put a lipstick on a pig, what will you eventually get? And I think we know the PLP's track record in governance. It's a failure.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I have to say, I always come in with an idea of what I want to discuss, and I threw that out the window a long time because I thought this was such a relevant and important discussion. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing, and thank you for bringing this level of debate to the show. We really appreciate that, and I think our audiences always appreciate when we have a high level of discussion. And the point is that we're not always going to agree. We have different ideologies, we come from different areas, but it's important to come to the table to discuss them and bring them on. At the end of the day, it's up to the Bahamian people to choose. So thank you so very much. We appreciate it. Continued success in both of your endeavors. And thank you so much. Mark, keep up the good work with Independence. I appreciate it. I may actually come out next year. Who knows? Well, we hope that you've enjoyed our show tonight. Special thanks to my guests for coming on tonight and sharing with us. Also my producer and technical staff. Once again, I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you next time on The Record.